this semester starting to think about, well, how could we actually put this bill into reality? How do we bring it into reality? And this is an exercise that does a bunch of things in our curriculum. First, it helps you integrate the science that you're learning in your classes with the policy and management studies that you're engaged in now. And this is a very important part of the curriculum, which is the integration of these things. The other thing you learn how to do is to work on a deadline. To some degree, you learn punctuality, although I'm not sure we're really getting that across particularly well. You learn how to work in a team. You learn how to deal with free riders and with group conflict, and produce what we will see today as excellent briefings. You learn how to take complex topics, 30, 40-page reports, hundreds of pages of output over the 2 semesters, and today we're going to hear you summarize that in 10 minutes. This is a really important professional skill that you'll be using for a very long time. I know that a lot of you think that the workshop is about the substance of each program and policy, and hopefully their substance, but it's really about the process of problem solving, because the problems that you'll be asked to address as a sustainability and environmental professional will be changing throughout your career. They certainly have changed through my career, starting with water, toxic waste, leaking underground storage tanks, climate change. Each year brings different challenges. For a long time, for example, people didn't want to talk about climate adaptation because they thought it distracted you from focusing on climate mitigation. Now, in our warming planet, we really have no choice but to do both. And so the nature of the problems that you'll be addressing will change throughout your career. The need for lifelong learning will not change throughout your career. And so that's really what I hope that this exercise has brought home to you. So today, we're going to hear 5 excellent briefings. The faculty got previews of them last week. And so if our first briefer, who had the misfortune of having to work with me over the past 2 semesters, will come forward, we'll get things started.
So hello everyone, good morning, I'm Sara, and today I'll be taking you through some of the work that my team and I have been doing over the past 2 semesters, which is analyzing and coming up with a program designed for the bill A02467, Composting Organic Waste at State and Municipal Buildings in New York State. The agenda is to go through the problem that the bill is trying to address, the proposed solution, the program designed to implement the solution, the political context around the program, and briefly the next 1 year of the program, closing with any questions and discussion. So what is the problem at hand? New York State overall produces 18 million tons of municipal solid waste annually. And to give you context, this is equivalent to the weight of the Empire State Building stacked 45,000 times. And this is generated every year. And 40% of this waste ends up in landfills. And as you can see in this figure, a majority of this waste, that is 2/3, is organic waste. But so what? When organic waste ends up in landfills, this actually leads to a host of issues. The first and most important is methane emissions. When organic waste decays in an anaerobic state within the landfills, it leads to methane emissions, which overall is responsible for 10% of New York State's overall greenhouse emissions. And as we need more and more land to dump all of our waste, it inevitably leads to more habitat destruction to create new landfills. And there's also this issue of leachate pollution, as the weight of all this organic waste pushes against the lining of the landfill, breaking it, and the moisture which is present within the organic waste dissolves some of these harmful chemicals like PFAS, or perfluoroalkyl substances, and the heavy metals which leach into the groundwater and nearby water sources. And all of these issues together have an environmental justice angle, because as we know, these landfills are more likely to be located near low-income communities. So to tackle some of these issues, the bill proposes an organic waste recycling program, which focuses on state and municipal agencies. So the idea here is to build a framework tackling the low-hanging fruits, which are these government agencies, and building this framework out for collection, transportation, and processing this waste. We'll see shortly how, and also reporting and tracking the effectiveness of this program. And once this framework is built out, we can later scale it to residential or commercial waste generated. And here I want to point out that New York City is an exception because it has already come up with its organic waste recycling plan. As some of you might have seen the brown bins in your buildings already. I see some of you nodding your head, so that's a good sign. So once this waste is collected and transported, it can be processed by composting or anaerobic digestion, which is essentially an enclosed form of composting done in an oxygen-less environment, and that creates biogas, which can be used to generate electricity. And both of these processes create fertilizers, which can be used to enrich the soil. So the idea is to divert organic waste from landfills and instead create useful resources instead of negative externalities like greenhouse emissions and leachate-related pollution. So to implement these solutions, our recommendation is a flexible approach to this program design. And what it means is that the state and municipal agencies can come up with their own organic waste recycling plans. And we feel that this approach is more suitable here because it gives, because as you can see in this figure, there is a lack of organic waste recycling facilities in some of these rural upstate New York areas. So what this approach will do is it will give municipalities the time and the flexibility to decide whether they want to develop their own recycling facilities or contract with private haulers to implement this program. So in addition to those technical aspects, it's also important to consider the political context. And as we know, New York State overall is a blue state, and the sponsor and co-sponsors of this bill, as we have highlighted, are also from these blue regions. So what this means is that the state agencies, which are under the Democrat-led state government, may not really see much of an issue when it comes to implementation of this program. But the local governments, especially in the red counties, is where we can see some resistance. So coming back to the program, once the bill is passed, I want to highlight that the first year is the planning year. And what this means is this is when all these state and municipal agencies within New York State will come up with their organic waste recycling plans. And they will be supported by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation throughout this process. And year 2 is when the implementation begins. So this is when the actual collection, transportation, and processing of the organic waste occurs. So the key actions over the first year include hiring contractors and staff over the first half of this year. And this is done by the existing environmental engineers and managers within the DEC. Over the second and third quarters, we'll be developing requirements for these recycling plans and coming up with performance management metrics to evaluate, as plans start coming. And towards the third and fourth quarters, we'll have these outreach programs to train these municipal agencies to come up with these good quality plans, and finally review the submitted plans as they start coming in. So at the end of the first year, we plan to have good quality plans on organic waste recycling in these agencies. And zooming into who exactly does this work, as I mentioned, the State Department of Environmental Conservation is the main agency, which has the Bureau of Waste Reduction and Recycling. And it already has environmental engineers and managers, but we recommend hiring 3 additional environmental engineers and 3 two-year contractors who will be our program development consultants. And all of this costs some money, so we expect around a ballpark of $2.5 million in the first year, and which will be split between personal services and the other than personal services, which includes the contractor costs and the cost for running all these outreach and training programs. And once there's any money that is spent, we need to know how successful we've been at the end of this year. And for that, we've come up with 2 key performance indicators. One of them is municipalities and agencies' participation. So this can be measured by the percentage of these facilities that are engaging and participating in all these training and outreach programs. And the second indicator is plan submission and quality, which can be measured by the count of the submitted and approved plans and also the approval rate. So to conclude, the key inputs and activities of the first year include developing and communicating the plan requirements with these state and municipal agencies and training them so that they can come up with their own plans. The outputs are the submitted and approved organic waste recycling plans, as we saw, which will start coming in towards the end of this first year. The outcome is the engagement of these agencies in, first, drafting these plans, and second, implementing them going forward. And the impact, which goes beyond 1 year, is what actually addresses some of these issues that we spoke about by mitigating greenhouse gas emissions, reducing leachate pollution, and reducing habitat destruction. And here I want to close by pointing out this figure, which is an image taken at the Shirley Chisholm State Park. And this whole park is built on top of a landfill, which gives us hope that waste can be managed. And our whole program is one step closer towards achieving this goal. Lastly, thanking our wonderful team for all their effort, and Professor Cohen for all his advice and inputs. Thanks from our team and this brown bin here.
Thank you, Sarah. First of all, really great presentation. You mentioned that it will be up to the municipalities to decide whether they themselves develop the plan, right? Or whether they outsource that development, is that correct?
So the development of plans is by the agencies, but whether they want to develop these recycling facilities in their regions or outsource the handling of this waste is up to them.
I see. So I was wondering whether, is there any kind of mechanism in case they do outsource it to keep the outsourced entity in check and kind of control whether that's working well?
Right. So finally, at the end of the day, these agencies are accountable. So they're supposed to be reporting how much waste has been processed. So they'll be reporting to the DEC, and this is how we'll hold them accountable.
Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. I had a similar question to Theo. So you mentioned that because a lot of these upstate counties are Republican, there might be trouble with implementation or getting buy-in. And I guess my question is, like, what are are there any actual concerns that have been voiced? You know, when I see a bill like this, I see a lot of things that seem to be more in line with like more traditional conservative elements of like environmentalism in terms of like keeping things clean and like generating energy and like self-sufficiency. And so I'm curious, like, is this just sort of like we have the heuristic of red and blue, and since it's coming from a blue government, we expect red opposition? Or is it like there's actually been things that have been said, like, oh, we think these are the faults with the bill and why we wouldn't want to do it?
So it's mostly what you said, which is the inherent opposition and also the need to spend some money on developing these facilities to take in all the waste. But I also want to point out that there was a similar bill, which is the food scraps recycling bill, which actually became a law. And that involves processing organic waste if you're a huge institution generating more than around 2 tons per week, and if you're located within 25 miles of a recycling facility. So that bill is already passed, it's an act, and it's already being implemented. So when it comes to implementation, again, I don't think there'll be so much of a resistance, but just from the inherent opposition point of view, and also the fact that this needs money, is where the opposition will come.
One more question over
there. Thank you for your presentation. Building off a similar theme of questions as mentioned earlier, I think one of the differences between these two is not just Democrat versus red counties, but also population density. So with a denser population, there's probably more awareness on a need to, to have to separate organic waste. Because in rural areas, they probably just compost it in their backyard, right? So I think, has your team considered like the needs of different population density and also their perspective and position on their support for the bill?
Right. So again, as you rightly pointed out, it's the red counties which are mostly in these rural areas where we expect there can be some opposition. And again, when it comes to recycling this waste, that's why we've come up with a flexible approach, right? So you can either develop this facility within your region, or transport all this waste to places where it's already there. So yeah, I think this is why we came up with this approach.
Thank you.
Okay.